All killer, no filler, folks. All right, so good morning,
Yeah.
good afternoon, good evening, good night, hello, and goodbye, my friends. My name is John, and welcome to Karate Without Belts. I am joined by two illustrious men, back again, talking to us about their upcoming seminar. Last year, they had talked about, we kind of had a post mortem, as it were, on the seminar, but now we're so lucky to talk about it prior to it. The everything that we talk about in the podcast will happen exactly as it will in the seminar, right? So
To the T.
to the T.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, right.
Everyone's got a plan until they get punched in the groin, right? We are joined by, of course, Keith Majer. Welcome, sir.
Thank you.
We should have had you on here sooner, but I kind of got blindsided by career adjustments. So
Stuff happens.
indeed, and of course, you know him, you love him. He's got the hair down there, but not on top. So as to make him more aerodynamic. Dan Bernardo.
Oh gosh.
He's got it on his chin. What do you want?
Welcome to Dan. Very aerodynamic. This nose is meant for wind resistance. It's cutting through.
Well, friends, let's get right to it. You guys are going to have what is the third iteration of this Martial is Universal seminar, or Universal Martial seminar. Let's pass the ball to Keith first. Keith, would you mind talking to us about, I guess, what is this seminar for folks who don't know?
It's pretty well summed up in the name. Good martial is universal. We are all built on the same frame: 2 arms, 2 legs, 1 head. Therefore, the techniques that work tend to be universal. A wrist lock in FMA is a wrist lock in Wing Chun, is a wrist lock in BJJ, and they're all done essentially the same way. The good stuff is universal. So we're trying to cut away the chaff. Well, this is the way we do it in my art. Well, all that stuff is fluff. Let's get to the meat and see what part of it works. That's pretty much it. It's actually Dan's idea. I was the one that kind of kicked him in the butt to say, well, let's do it. But it's kind of Dan's idea. It's something he'd been wanting to do. It is something that he and I had inadvertently explored for more than a decade. He would be overdoing his stuff and I would be doing my stuff, and then at some point he'd post something or we'd see each other and I'd go, well, that's just like we do over in Wing Chun, or that's just like. We were constantly finding matches, and so it went from there.
That's amazing that you get two people who are talking about martial arts and they're not just saying, hey, you're ripping me off. Hey, you're ripping me off. It's actually being able to have peaceable conversation about it.
More than saying, hey, you're ripping me off, one thing that has really gets my craw is in any martial art community, there are the binaries. This is the only way. This is the way I was taught. This is the way it is done. This is the only way it can be. Bullshit. Excuse me. Bleep.
We don't have for bleeps.
Well, I just bleeped myself.
Right.
I see so much of that so many people think in strict binary fashion. And I'm going to avoid mentioning a name, but Dan knows who I'm talking about. I recently posted a statement by, oh gosh, it's not Lao Tzu, but it is a statement, the idea that, was it Lao Tzu?
Chapter 76, yeah.
Right. And Dan went in and pulled out the Chinese and really fleshed it out. But somebody he and I know immediately right, untrue. It's totally untrue. The supple does not survive. The strong is important. And blah. The idea that it is that binary in his mind, in anybody's mind, that you can't hold on to two concepts. That strength is good, being supple is good. You can't this idea that you cannot accept another person's thought.
Hmm.
Do you get what I'm saying?
Yeah, that it's interesting that how, or take that out to a larger level, just saying you can't accept somebody else's thought just by making a simple statement in public.
Yeah.
That rings so true to so many, just even outside the martial arts, it rings so true to so many different things. So
People are very, very, very binary in their thinking process. Certainly, there are things that are true and false. In base 10 mathematics, 2 plus 2 equals 4. Period. End of story. But in art and everything you guys and I do, it's all called an art.
hmm.
So there's got to be some. Well, I like a little of Picasso with my Rembrandt, right? There's got to be a little fluidity. But to the point of the seminar, there are some things that hold true. And from that, you kind of got to cut through the chaff, the art specific. This is how my art does it. Well, yeah, okay, but let's discuss why a wrist lock locks. Why does it work? Well, the joints are aligned in a certain way. Oh, okay. So you get down to the nitty gritty of it.
Pass the ball over to Dan for a minute. Dan, how do you think this time around things are going to be different? You guys accomplished about 2 seminars at this point and going on a third. What's different this time around?
So this time, well, each time the theme has been relatively different. This time the main theme is measure or range, particularly how to change range safely, and whether or not you're boxing, whether you're using a sword, whether you're using a stick, whether you're kicking, whatever, the ability to be in a certain range, let's say long range, and then you need to get, because the objective is to get inside the opponent's weapon and neutralize them and maybe put them on the ground. If that is the objective, you have to be able to change ranges safely, or else you get knocked out on your way in, right? So that's the main theme for the weekend. Another thing that's different is our second workshop. We had a wonderful session with the Associate Dean of the Law School at University of South Carolina. She's coming back again, which is going to be awesome. But we are also going to have an educational session with the CEO for a local nonprofit called Lighthouse for Life that fights human trafficking. This is going to be an interesting session that I hope is educational for people who may have some thought of what is human trafficking, how it works, what to look out for, et cetera, and then when they talk to her, they may not know everything. So as a man who has 2 kids, specifically a teenage daughter, this sort of matters to me, and of course it goes with the theme of good martial is universal, being able to look at martial arts self-defense, again, maybe not from a fighting perspective, but maybe from a different perspective. So, and when we talk about ranges, maybe that range has to do with knowing who your kids are talking to. That's a really long range, but it is a range. So those are really the things that are going to be different this time around.
What had brought you guys from going, all right, we're going to do a martial arts seminar about the differences of our stuff, to we're bringing in a nonprofit CEO and a lawyer to talk about these 2 topics that extremely relevant? Come to our martial arts seminar. We're going to learn wrist locks, and we're also going to learn about human trafficking. Like these don't necessarily seem to be things that, on the face of them, go together. They do, but
I know.
you bury the lead there a little. How did that come to be?
Well, so in my mind, we when we practice martial arts, sometimes we talk about self-defense, but when we train, we only really train a minute moment of that whole self-defense situation. So we have maybe, let's say we work on defending against a wrist lock, and we put the guy on the ground. That takes what, 5 seconds at most, right? Maybe I broke his wrist. Maybe I slammed his head off of the concrete ground. Now I've got to deal with police. I've got to deal with lawyers. I've got to deal with all these things. Nobody talks about those things. So when we look at the legal aspect, we have to understand also that there's a legal side to self-defense, and to know, at least have a better understanding of what the legalities of self-defense are, then that may change your objective when you are going to try to pull off that wrist lock, which in my opinion is very, very important. A lot of people will give it a lot of lip service to, preemptive striking and verbal de-escalation and like all these things, but then don't really train it, don't really look at it from an actual legal perspective. And so I want people, when they come to the seminar, or if they're going to join in via Zoom, we will have a Zoom link. If they want to join in, no matter where they are, and hang out and ask questions for the people on Friday, I want it to have more of a comprehensive aspect to the training. So that's why.
Let me add a few things to that too, like talking about human trafficking, and then Dan mentioning, well, maybe you want to know who your kids are talking to. In martial arts, it's very common. They walk in the door, they want to learn self-defense. Understanding the legal parameters alters how or if you even enter into the altercation. It's the early part of the fight. You mentioned trying to talk your way out of it, or as Sifu Taggart calls it, verbal jujitsu. That's kind of in the face. The fight is right there. It's right there up against you. It's in your face. But if you're looking at the legal aspects and you're thinking about things like human trafficking and stuff, you're actually entering your defense, your self-defense or family defense, much, much earlier, which is good. You can be much more preemptive and less violent. It's one way to think about it. The fight also, it just has, again, Dan is right. We train this very, very small physical point where the fight is purely physical and in your face. One thing I harp on a lot, I have a little spiel I go through. I call it ACT. There's ambush, close up, and taunt. Taunt is part of a fight, and it is how you handle the taunt. That's where you can get into verbal jujitsu, or my answer to taunt is tactics. Can I escape? Does the taunter have friends? Are there barriers to my escape? Are there barriers to the taunter? Are they possibly setting up an ambush, etc., etc.? The legal aspects, or having at least some awareness of the legal aspects, will alter how you handle all of these things. When it comes down to punches, that's passion. You've stopped thinking about the law. Beforehand, you have a chance to think about the law and the ramifications, and are you justified, and will the police just come and say, that's fine, you're cool, or nope, you're coming with us. And afterwards, but not in the middle of the fight, you're not going to be thinking about the law. If you haven't thought about it beforehand, you certainly won't be thinking about it afterwards. Somebody will think about it for you, i.e. the judge, right?
Or any prosecuting attorneys or whatever.
Yeah. They'll be spelling out, you could have done this, but you didn't.
Mm-hmm.
So you have to have it. You have to have exposed yourself to it so that you can think about it beforehand, so that you have an idea of what you're up against afterwards.
Hmm.
In the middle, if a guy's punching you in the face, well, as Tyson said, as soon as you get punched in the face, you don't remember your name. You sure as hell don't remember the law either. Right?
True. So it's implementing kind of all these things to kind of make it not only universal but also well-rounded to actually be able to get people an education in doing so, which most of the time doesn't seem to be what people pursue in terms of they want to teach people karate or martial arts or whatever, but they don't really want to go into the legality of what goes on the supposed altercation. That depends if you're teaching it in that way or not. I know plenty of people who don't, but I've also I remember. I think Keith, maybe you remember this a lot better than me and Dan. It's kind of the age of hearsay.
Yeah.
You walk into a place and be like, yeah, if you do that, this is gonna happen, and it's funny that we think like nowadays, you just believe in a crazy guy. For a long time, that's just how people got information. There's just a guy said a thing, and you're just like, yeah, that's what he said, right? And then now it's kind of just blown out to the internet, but
yeah, it's no different. I mean,
yeah.
we got a whole world of conspiracy theories that are somebody thought, oh, that's how it probably happened. Let me make a video on it. We've never left the age of hearsay. That's never, ever, ever gone away. That's people. It's inherent in martial arts. The bad hearsay becomes a chain of teaching. Somebody learns something bad, they solidify it in their thought process, they end up becoming a teacher, they teach the same bad concept or bad idea. Hearsay. Oh, if I palm strike you in the bridge of the nose, I'm going to drive a bone into your brain and you're going to die. There is no bone in your nose, folks. So that's probably not going to happen.
It's right here, right? That's a bone. That's not cartilage. That's not something basic high school education should teach you at all.
Right. So part of what the seminar is about is diffusing some of that stuff by avoiding art-specific considerations. Like I said, how does a wrist lock work? Well, let's look at the bones. Or what happens if I palm strike you at the base of the nose? Well, the cartilage breaks and you end up with a boxer's nose, and you probably start to have maybe a deviated septum problem later in life. But that's about all that really happens. It's not like a bone gets driven into your brain. We try and cut through some of that stuff. Dan is very, very good at digging through, as you know, digging through his art and history and books and so-and-so said this, and here's a really bad example of it, and here's a better example of it. I try to cut through a lot of the fluff too. I am not as in depth as Dan, but I try to. An example being, I was taught in Wing Chun, 2 hands never touch one. And then I start going, but we do it all the time. How does that rule even come to exist? That some people have that rule that when 2 hands are touching one, that is a potential for a trap, but we do it all the time. It happens in the Mukyang Jong form. It happens all the time. So it's a bad rule. It's something that somebody created as a rule, but it's a bad rule. So the whole idea behind good martial is universal is to say, don't think about that stuff. Let's look at actual physical stuff that works for the physical combat part. But then, like we had the opportunity to have the attorneys there and say, well, let's look at what happens if you clock somebody and they hit their head on a planter and die.
Again, it's all about objectives, right? Like somebody's coming at you with a weapon, and your objective is to disarm that weapon and neutralize the opponent in some way. Let's say the objective is neutralizing the opponent so that they're on the ground and you're not. That's an objective that I could give to anybody in any system of martial art. And most of the time, they're going to do something very similar. If the attack is coming in at this angle and it's coming here and your left foot is forward and your objective is the same, I don't care if you're a boxer, if you're a Filipino martial artist, if you're a Wing Chun practitioner, Tang Soo Do Karate, I don't care. Chances are they're going to do pretty much the same thing. And if we understand the objectives based on the legality, if we can say, well, I don't want to smash his head off the concrete floor, so the objective is going to change. I need to make sure that he goes down safely. Maybe I need to put his head on my foot when I put him down, right? Maybe I need to make sure that I control that weapon so that it doesn't go flying because I've got bystanders over here, right? So the objective really starts to decide what the technique will look like, not style. Styles are just methods of instruction, what tools you use to instruct, what uniform you wear,
Names.
what terminology you use, right? Like things, that's what styles are. But
Yeah.
real, but when you start to see that if you have one objective, good martial is universal. And then likewise, and I say this all the time, bad martial is also universal. So if you're doing something horrible, I don't care what style it is, it's going to be horrible. So that's really why I want to have this almost non-martial, quote unquote, umbrella that we do first. Everybody goes into this seminar and starts to learn about something that has nothing to do, almost seemingly nothing to do with martial arts, because what it does is it puts us in a path of let's look at objectives rather than let's look at styles. Then we can train and look at the objectives from different perspectives. That's my objective.
Okay.
Well, didn't you recently put up a writing by Hong Yi that talking about why you train and why you use martial art, which lends directly to this idea of, hey, let's find out that here in South Carolina you are you have a different consideration on self-defense than you would in some other state, for one thing, or what constitutes self-defense. I mean, your own, I don't want to say creator, but Young Wee, and forgive my pronunciation, but he had said it's not about, as I recall, and I'm going to be greatly paraphrasing, it's not just about being muscular, strong, defensive, fighting, aggression. It has a greater purpose. Guru Santos says the same thing. He's well known for saying, it's about life and family. It's not about beating up on people. If you understand the ramifications, also if you get into the weeds with the lawyers and hence the juries, who have to decide, is this altercation just? When you get into the weeds of looking at that, you come away with a different perspective. To especially most martial art practitioners being hormonally driven, middle-aged, prime age males, there tends to be an I don't care, I'm going to smash you in the face attitude. Andre mentioned a guy I know, Sifu Dominic Izzo. He likes to wear a shirt that says, Wing Chun, touch me and your first lesson is free. And every martial art has used that little cliche at some point or another. But boy, you could get yourself in trouble if you actually did it.
Right.
If you're standing there in the mall or in the grocery store in the line and somebody taps you on the shoulder and you bop them one, you wouldn't be out in public very often. You'd be somebody's friend behind bars.
Okay. All right. That's
Here we go.
we are touching so many
Self-defense to a
points
new
today.
point. All right.
No, I mean, this brings up a big thing that we don't talk about a lot, is that because we're kind of obsessed with styles and histories and all this other stuff. But I mean, at least from an American perspective, there is a idea that, oh, we can just blanket everything as self-defense. And from a legal perspective, that can be all taken care of. And I'm assuming the well within legal team is saying the opposite of that, is that even though if you get into an altercation, you have to prove that you're the one who's being attacked. You have to prove that. You have to, and I think it's a little easier with cameras and everything nowadays, but still, that doesn't mean you're out of the woods.
There's 5 elements to a self-defense case.
Not legal advice.
No, but if any one of those gets proven that it wasn't, that you didn't have one of those elements, essentially, your whole defense goes out the door.
Okay.
It's complicated. And so the best part about, what Susan does, the lawyer, is she gives us real cases, and we have to talk our way through them, and then she'll tell you whether or not this person was convicted or not. And a lot of time, or I mean, even last time, I think, Keith, you probably, attest to this. There were a couple that we were like, oh wow, yeah, we didn't expect that. But then, like, some of them were like, oh yeah, totally. But I mean, there was points where it made you think. It made you really second guess and question about whether or not, because it stopped being opinion. It stopped being like, well, what if, right? You can't have what ifs. You can't have maybes, right? It's just, this is the information we're given. So based on the information that we're given about this case, is this person, was this person legally defending themselves, or were they not? And it's fascinating. Yeah.
It gives you a different perspective. Me personally, a lot of it aligns with my moral perspective. Mm-hmm. And some people who teach martial arts do try to keep the moral there, but there are a lot who don't, especially in the, and I'm not picking on JKD, but a lot of those aggressive 20-something, 30-something males who are thinking, touch me and your first lesson is free. There is no moral consideration in that, in my opinion. And exploring the legal,
maybe, but yeah.
Oh, yeah, well, okay, you I guess you could call that their morality, but to me, that's I want a morality that I can go to bed with, mm-hmm. and not one where I have to go, well, was I right? Was I wrong? The more you think about the legal aspects, because that's all. Any country, not just the United States, any country's legal code is about trying to weed out what that moral code is. Mm. I mean, that's true. Regardless of where the country is, if a murder is committed, the question is, was it a just murder? Well, what does just mean? Now, it may change country to country a little bit because of their morality, but there is still a general moral code. And in the case of something as serious as a death, a murder, there tends to be a lot of similarities even across cultures. You just, Dan mentioned, I think maybe even during the last one, we have this high opinion of the samurai, but there was a period of time where they would just walk. If they just didn't like you, they'd lop off your head. I mean, you were just...
Yeah, they were bored out of their mind.
Yeah, you're just in my way, and I don't like the way you smell. What? That wouldn't go in most cultures these days, right? It wouldn't go legally or morally.
There was a particular class of people at a certain point in time.
True.
Let us not privilege the samurai in that regard, but
yeah.
I hate to quickly, if you guys can give me give me one thing you wish everyone could take away from this seminar coming up. And 2, how can they find the Zoom link? How can they find information on this seminar? Start with Keith.
The one thing I would want people to take away from this seminar is that, kind of like I mentioned at the outset, that things are not that binary, that it is not necessarily a good idea to say, well, in my style, we do it this way, and that is the only way that will work. No, we're trying to weed past that. Hopefully, people will be, they'll go through the experience that Dan and I went with each other, where we would watch different martial arts and go, oh, that right there is exactly a fraction of what I do too. And that must be the good stuff. If people get to that point, then watching any martial art becomes a learning lesson. They should be able to watch a Wing Chun guy should be able to watch a BJJ match and go, oh man, yeah, that clinch right there, the way he's holding that hand, perfect. That will work for me. Instead of, well, it's BJJ, it's not Wing Chun, I don't care. So that's what I would want people to come away with.
Great, great. Thank you, Keith. And Dan,
You're
how
welcome.
about you?
I would say similarities between systems help when you understand the similarities. It helps to make the differences matter. I don't want to talk too philosophically about this, but what that really means is if I look at, a 1960s Volkswagen Beetle, and then I look at a 1960s Porsche, and I ask somebody, just tell me what the differences are, they could probably name a bunch of differences just right off the bat, But if I ask somebody, tell me what are the similarities, I want you to truly understand what makes that Volkswagen Beetle and that Porsche the same, then they start to understand, okay, well, I know how an engine works, I know how a powertrain works, I know how a transmission works, I know how suspension works, I know how brakes work, I know how all these things work. Okay, then if I ask you to tell me the differences, you will explain to me not only differences, but why they are different, because you will have an understanding of what those similarities are. So then I can come to you and say, I need you to design a braking system. And then you could say, well, what's it for? Because I could design a braking system for a truck, but that's not going to do anything if I put it on a smart car. It's not that they don't work. But if I know how braking systems work, I can design a braking system specifically for your needs. And so understanding the similarities really helps to allow you to make the differences make sense. And then you can look at different styles and go, well, that's different because of this. That is why they do that differently. It's the same principle. That's those are brakes for a sports car. That's a brake for a truck. But they do the same thing. The differences are because of this. And so then there's not this, as Keith was talking about, this strict binary, this false dichotomy. There's none of that anymore. There's just understanding. And there's more. Does that make sense? That's the biggest thing I want people to take away from this seminar.
Cool. And where can we find information on this?
So you can go to wellwithinma.com, click on the upcoming events link, and you'll see a way to register and a schedule. And even link, you'll see links at the bottom, a link for the Susan Kuo, the attorney that we'll have there, and then a link for Lighthouse for Life, the nonprofit that will be there. So
Great. Well, thank you so much, guys. Sorry to keep it to a minimum today, but it's all killer, no filler today. I'd love to have you guys back before the end of the year. And Keith, we want to hear stories from the 70s.
70s, 60s. How far back do you want to go?
How far back can we go? That's the real question.
Yes.
But until then, gentlemen, thank you so much. Good. I always have the theater thing, so I don't say good luck. I say break a leg. Don't break too many though. And yeah, have a great time, guys. I wish I could be there, but I encourage everybody who can go should go, and anyone who can follow that link, go to that link. But until then, gentlemen, thank you so much.
All right.
And thank you, John.
Thank you.
Thank you, guys, and don't forget, everybody, keep on training.